Well, good morning. Welcome to Toolbox Tuesday. And today I wanted to chat with you for about 10, 15 minutes on uh, the need for protecting our hearing. Uh, we can go as far as putting into place a hearing protection plan where warranted. So I want to discuss a little bit about that. Most of us have family members, even ourselves, that have permanent hearing loss. This can start at a young age through practices such as shooting guns without proper hearing protection, being around loud environments without proper hearing protection, and so on. The issue with hearing loss is that it's accumulative. It's not like hurting your hearing or hurting your ears is not like hurting your finger where it heals back and potentially it's back to 100% in the end. When we have hearing loss, that becomes a permanent issue. Now, obviously, I could have a situation where my ears are ringing, blah blah, and I have this acute kind of hearing thing. You can tell by going to a concert, things like that, where you leave and your ears are ringing or whatever like that. Now, that could be both. That could be a kind of a short-term, acute kind of symptom, but then tied to that can definitely be long-term hearing loss and permanent hearing loss. Um, I know lots of people that have their dominant ear for shooting or whatever one is facing the gun when they're shooting lots. When they've had that practice that they've been doing years and years and years, they definitely have one ear that can hear better than the other. And I know the effects of this. I have a permanent hearing loss in my right ear from an incident that happened when I was young. It was actually not related to noise. It was related to a head injury and that. And a lot of times I'm turning my head, and it's a long life uh, of turning my head, saying what higher voices like female voices, higher pitched voices, have a hard time hearing on my right ear, but on my left ear, it's a lot clearer. Now, sleeping at night's a lot easier if I just sleep with my head in the pillow and I can't hear anything out this ear. It's nice and quiet. But so what is noise? Noise is any unwanted sound, and essentially just that. It's something that's maybe going to be a little uncomfortable. You can think of something like if you're in uh, a room where it has generators, even if you had a generator nearby, loud music. It's something that you can't, where you have to raise your voice to have normal conversation. Anytime you raise your voice to have normal conversation, you're probably looking at something that you want to start looking at your hearing, or the noise control in that area. Uh, some noises, if you get up to about 115 decibels, if you get into an area that has about 150, you can have permanent hearing damage or hearing loss in 15 seconds or less if in an environment like that. If you're arm's length away from someone and you have to raise your voice, we have to look at these situations. Now, what do? I'm going to look into occupational health safety regulations. There's a bunch of information on here. Regulation 110 through 114, actually, in the regulations. Then there's a little bit on PPE as well. And I want to talk about this briefly. So when it comes to PPE, it says exposure to noise, and this is section 99 in the regulations, where a worker is permitted or required or permitted by these regulations to use hearing protectors. So like, let's say we get into a situation where we're deemed to need them. The employer has to provide the hearing protectors and require workers to use those hearing protectors, and that it reduces the noise level received into the worker's ear to not more than 85 decibels. So 85 decibels is actually going to be our threshold point for being in a situation where I need to be putting things in place legally as an employer or a contractor. I have to have certain things in place. So let's look at that. Noise reduction through design construction of buildings. So even in 1997, it was added to the legislation on any building or design after 1997. They want, in OHS regulations, actually talks about building in noise control. So having noise control put in, if you have loud equipment, stuff like that, to isolate workers from that noise. Now, where do we start? Let's start by measuring noise levels. Now, identifying noise levels in areas and then identifying the source of the noise. Those are two things that we want to do. What is the level where workers are working, and what is the source of that noise? Because when I know the source of it, I can actually put in some controls. In every area that workers are required to or permitted to work, and the noise level may frequently exceed 80 decibels, employer contractor shall use a noise level that the noise level is measured in accordance with an approved method, and that we actually identify where that noise is coming from. The employer is actually then regulated to keep documented records of the noise level measurements, as long as the contractor operates in the province of Saskatchewan. So forever, you have to, if you have decibel levels that are going to potentially injure workers, you must record those and keep them on record forever. Employer contractors shall ensure that any area which measurements show noise levels exceeding 80 decibels is clearly marked by a sign. So we have to have signage. If we have an area that I'm walking into, like this doorway right here, if I walk into that room and it's got noise levels above 80 decibels, I have to actually mark it as you're entering an area that requires hearing protection, or at least notifies the workers of the hearing or of the decibel levels in that area. So where a worker's occupational noise exposure is believed to be between 80 and 85 decibels, you must inform the worker of the hazard, make available hearing protection that's adequate, and train the workers on the selection, use, and maintenance of those hearing protectors. Daily exposure greater than 85 decibels. So 85, like I said, is the major threshold where we have to step up our game. If it exceeds 85 decibels, you need to inform the workers of the hazards and noise of the noise exposure, take all reasonable practical steps to reduce the noise levels and minimize the noise exposure, okay? And you must document this process. Where it's not reasonably practicable to reduce workers' occupational exposure below 85, or the noise level below 90 decibels, in any area where a worker may permitted to work, or employer contractors shall provide hearing protectors, train the workers' selection, use, and maintenance of the hearing protectors, and arrange the worker to have at least once every 24 months during the worker's normal working hours. So you have to pay them, and you have to pay for the test, an audiometric test. So this is paid time and for free, and that needs to be kept on record so that we know that OH&S and that the worker understands that we're monitoring the hearing and the effectiveness of the program, so there's no hearing loss actually happening in the workplace. Okay, we're 10 or more workers. This is an important aspect because now we're going to get into a hearing conservation plan. Where 10 or more workers occupational noise exposure exceeds or is believed to exceed 85 decibels, an employer contractor, in consultation with the committee, develop a hearing conservation plan and review, where necessary, revise hearing conservation plan every 3 years. This is legal. This is section 114. Employer contractor shall implement a hearing conservation plan with these things, and a supervisor must oversee this plan. So you have to delegate someone to oversee the plan and then implement these few things. It must be in writing. It must include the method and procedures to use in assessing the occupational noise exposure of the workers, the methods of noise control to be used, including engineering controls and administrative arrangements. So let's talk quickly about different controls we could put in place. First one, obviously eliminate. If I could have a hazard and such as noise, and I can eliminate that hazard, that's fantastic. And that's kind of like what I'm doing right here. So I have built into this shop a air compressor room and dust collector room. So what it's designed to do is this compressor, if I look at I looked at the owner's manual, and it actually indicates that it's going to be 87 decibels at 3 feet away from the compressor. So what I did is I built an insulated with sound insulation room that's going to house, with the door here, going to house the air compressor, therefore reducing the noise exposure levels to a place where hearing protection will not be required, just because the air compressor is running. Obviously, using air tools, there's going to be noise exposure there, and going to need hearing protectors for that situation. If I can substitute or replace, so some compressors are actually louder than others. You can substitute or replace the location of the air compressor, or where you have this exposure going on. Engineering controls such as this room is a great option. Administrative controls is going to be your hearing protectors and the options you have in that, not to mention your time that you're going to be exposed to the noises. And then PPE and fit testing, comfortable, it has to be effective, that kind of stuff. So what else do we need in the plan? The selection and use and maintenance of hearing protectors. And there's lots of options. There's from an earmuff style to earplugs, different hearing protectors and protection things. PPE give you different levels of decibel protection. A lot of times we're going to actually be in an area or using something that I have a earplug with a ear muff over top, dual hearing protection. It's going to give me a lot of decibel drop. The maintenance of exposure records. So now you want to be maintaining, sometimes in some areas that are very high decibels, you'll see in plants and that, where you'll walk into a door and they may even have a login sheet on the door that's going to indicate who was in that room, how long they were there, and their exposure. The requirements for audiometric testing needs to be laid out in the hearing conservation plan, and a schedule for reviewing the hearing conservation plan and procedures for conducting the review. And the employer contractor shall make a copy of hearing conservation plan readily available for reference by workers. Now, I think the whole point of this, guys, is that we don't negate hearing loss as a long-term effect of work, and that as a hazard that we need to deal with. It's legislated, and it makes sense to protect our workers from hearing. Last example before we finish up, such things as tools. We have hearing issues or noise issues, I should say, in a lot of different areas when it comes to the workplace, work activities, working in other people's environments and that. And here's one example of a tool. So what I have here is a backpack blower, and you'll see here that this says right here 77 decibels, but that's measured at 50 feet or 15 meters from the actual unit. When I'm actually running this backpack blower, which is just a backpack blower, it is actually 112 decibels at the engine. So if I'm not taking appropriate measures in running this, and I've seen people, and I've ran this for close to an hour to 2 hours, clearing snow off sidewalks, getting dust, and instead of using a broom, I use that a lot of times. And there's an extreme amount of noise at the ear when I'm running something like this. So appropriate protection, appropriate records, and an appropriate plan so that your workers go home safe at the end of the day, the same condition that they showed up at work. Thank you for joining us for Toolbox Tuesday. Please join us again next Tuesday. Have a great day.